The 7-year-old stood motionless in the doorway of the mansion's east wing, clutching a tattered rabbit, while her mother's voice echoed 3 floors below, discussing another specialist who had failed. Trevor's hand stilled on the mahogany banister he was repairing. The child hadn't made a sound since he'd arrived that morning, but her eyes tracked every movement of his woodworking tools with an intensity that made his chest tighten. 7 years. Not a single word since the day she was born. The housekeeper had whispered it like a curse. 7 years of silence, despite dozens of therapists and specialists her billionaire mother could afford. But when Trevor's 6-year-old son arrived after school and began sanding a small wooden horse from scrap pieces, something shifted in the girl's posture. She took 1 step forward, then another. What Trevor did next would shatter everything this family believed about silence, speech, and the unthinkable distance between a mother's control and a daughter's voice. The Bradford estate sat like a monument to old money on the hill overlooking the harbour. Trevor had been working on homes for 15 years, but places like this still made his jaw tighten. Not from intimidation, exactly, more from the weight of knowing that behind all that perfection, people hurt just the same as anyone else. Miranda, the head housekeeper, had shown him around that first morning with clipped efficiency. Restore the mahogany staircase, repair water damage to the crown molding, refinish the library shelves. Simple enough. What Miranda hadn't mentioned was the child. Trevor had been working for maybe 2 hours when he felt it. That particular prickle on the back of his neck that came from being watched. He turned slowly, and there she was. A small girl in a white dress, standing in the doorway with dark hair falling past her shoulders. She held a stuffed rabbit that had seen better days, one ear hanging by a thread, the fur worn away in patches from years of constant holding. Their eyes met. Trevor waited for her to speak. Instead, she just stared at him with an expression he recognized because he'd seen it in his own son's face after the accident. That look of someone who had learned too early that the world could take away the things you loved most. He went back to his work, but after a while he started talking. Not to her exactly, just out loud. Explaining what he was doing, why the wood needed to dry, how you could tell good mahogany by the way it caught the light. She didn't respond, didn't move. But she didn't leave either. That evening, Miranda appeared. "Mrs. Bradford would like a word with you." Trevor followed her to an office that smelled of old books and expensive perfume. Carolyn Bradford sat behind a desk carved from walnut, her blonde hair perfectly styled. She was younger than he'd expected, maybe early 40s, with the kind of beauty that came from excellent genetics and better maintenance. But there was something brittle around her eyes. "Mr. Hayes," she said without preamble, "Miranda tells me my daughter spent the afternoon watching you work. Violet doesn't do that. She doesn't engage with anyone outside of her therapists and Miranda. I need to understand what happened today." Trevor shifted his weight. "Nothing happened, ma'am. I was working." She watched. "I didn't approach her or speak directly to her." Carolyn studied him. "Violet hasn't spoken since she was born. 7 years of specialists, therapists, interventions. They've ruled out everything medical. She simply chooses not to use them." The way she said chooses carried weight. "If she's showing interest in your work, I want you to continue. But don't try to make her talk. Don't push her." Trevor met Carolyn's eyes and saw fear. "My son Raymond didn't talk for 8 months after his mother died. Everyone had advice. They all wanted to fix him." He paused. What finally worked wasn't trying to make him talk. It was giving him something worth talking about. Carolyn's expression shifted. And what was that? Building things. Small wooden toys at first. He couldn't control much after she died, but he could control what his hands made. The next morning, Violet was already waiting when Trevor arrived. Around 10:30, Raymond's school called. There'd been an incident. Could Trevor pick him up? Miranda surprised him. "Bring the boy back here. Let him sit with you while you work." When they walked into the east wing, Violet stood slowly and took 2 careful steps toward them. Raymond looked at her with immediate recognition. He reached into his backpack and pulled out the wooden horse he'd been working on. Still rough, unsanded. He held it out to Violet. She took it, turned it over in her hands, looked at Raymond, and nodded once. Then she sat down, the horse in one hand, the rabbit in the other, and watched as Trevor showed Raymond how to smooth rough edges with sandpaper. Over the following week, a pattern emerged. Trevor would arrive to find Violet waiting. Raymond would come after school, and the 3 of them would fall into an easy rhythm. Trevor brought scraps of wood. Violet's attention sharpened when he talked about patience and precision. On the 6th day, Trevor brought an unfinished wooden box. He showed Raymond how to fit the corners together, then left the pieces on the floor near where Violet always sat. 20 minutes later, Violet had arranged all the pieces in the correct order. Raymond's face lit up. "You did it right!" And for the first time, the corners of Violet's mouth lifted in something that wasn't quite a smile, but was definitely the beginning of one. That night, Carolyn appeared. She looked at the wooden pieces still sitting in perfect order. "She's never done anything like this before." Trevor wiped sawdust from his hands. "She watches. She learns. Just quietly. The specialists say I should limit her exposure to unqualified individuals who might reinforce her selective mutism." Trevor thought about the parade of experts who'd tried to fix Raymond. Your daughter doesn't need fixing. She needs space to figure out what she wants to say and who she wants to say it to. Carolyn's eyes glistened. "Continue with your work. If Violet wishes to observe, that's acceptable." The following Monday, Trevor arrived to find the east wing empty. Miranda appeared, troubled. "Mrs. Bradford has instructed that Violet will not be coming anymore. There was an incident over the weekend with a specialist who tried to take the rabbit." Violet became agitated. "Mrs. Bradford feels it's best to limit changes to her routine." Miranda lowered her voice. "The child hasn't come out of her room since Saturday. Won't eat, won't engage. These past 2 weeks were the first time I've ever seen her actually present. I need to finish the library shelves," Trevor said carefully. "Second floor, west wing." Miranda's eyes flickered with understanding. "I'll show you." Trevor worked differently that afternoon. He talked while he worked, explaining each step in detail. His voice carried through the open library door, down the hallway. He talked about Raymond's first wooden car, about his wife, how she'd taught him that silence wasn't the same as absence. After an hour, Trevor heard it. Movement in the hallway. 15 minutes later, Violet stood in the doorway, the rabbit clutched to her chest. Trevor pulled out a piece of pine and sandpaper. He set them on the floor near the doorway. "This piece needs smoothing. Real gentle, with the grain. Takes patience." He went back to the shelves. For a long time, nothing happened. Then he heard the soft scrape of sandpaper against wood, rhythmic and careful. They worked in parallel silence for the rest of the afternoon. When Miranda came to announce dinner, she froze. Violet sat on the library floor, running sandpaper over pine with intense concentration. Miranda's eyes met Trevor's, and he saw desperate hope there. The next morning, Carolyn was waiting in the library, her back rigid. "Miranda told me you deliberately worked near Violet's room after I explicitly instructed no contact." "I worked in the library because that's where the shelves need refinishing. If Violet heard me and chose to come watch, that was her choice." Carolyn turned, her eyes red-rimmed. "Do you know what it's like to watch your child exist in complete silence? To wonder every day if she blames you for not being there when—" She stopped. "Yes," Trevor said simply. He told her about the accident, about Raymond's 8 months of silence. He walked away without a scratch, physically, but he didn't talk for 8 months. Carolyn sat down with careful control. Violet's father died when she was 2. Car accident. She was with him. The doctors said the trauma caused selective mutism. She twisted her hands. The specialist this weekend kept saying Violet needed to learn that silence was maladaptive, that the rabbit was a crutch. So I watched as this expert tried to force my daughter to give up the one thing that's made her feel safe. And when Violet tried to run, all I could think was that I'd failed her again. You didn't fail her. You're trying to protect her the only way you know how. But maybe the protection she needs isn't from silence. Carolyn looked at him with desperation. I don't understand why a carpenter can reach my daughter when trained professionals cannot. I'm not trying to reach her. I'm just giving her space to exist without expectation. Raymond and I work with wood because it makes sense to us in ways words sometimes don't. He met Carolyn's eyes. Maybe Violet recognizes that. What if she never speaks? What if the goal isn't making her speak, but making her feel safe enough that she wants to? Carolyn put her face in her hands and cried. When she finally looked up, her facade was gone. I don't know how to be the mother she needs. Stop hiring people to fix her. Start spending time with her doing something that doesn't require words. He gestured to the shelves. Sit down with her and sand a piece of wood. Just be present with her in the silence. I don't know how to do carpentry. Neither does Violet. That's not the point. That afternoon, Violet appeared within an hour. Around 3, Raymond arrived. When Carolyn appeared an hour later, Trevor invited her to watch him show Raymond how to use wood stain. Slowly, Carolyn knelt beside Raymond. Trevor guided her through applying stain. Her first attempt was too heavy. Lighter. The wood will take what it needs if you give it time. They worked for the next hour. When Raymond's piece was done, he rolled a small wooden car to Violet. She picked it up, examined the wheels, then rolled it back with precision. They fell into a game that required no words. Carolyn watched, tears streaming. She used to play like that with her father. She's still here, just finding her way back on her own terms. Over the next 2 weeks, Carolyn appeared each day, learning to sand wood, to apply stain. She was terrible at it initially, but she kept showing up. Violet watched her mother with intensity, seeing the woman who'd always been surrounded by experts now sitting with sawdust in her hair. One afternoon, Trevor set out materials for building a wooden box. Violet watched, then moved closer. There's another set of pieces on that shelf if you want to try. Slowly, she moved to the shelf and picked up pieces. When Violet encountered a corner that wouldn't fit, she looked up at Trevor and held out the pieces, not asking with words, but asking. Trevor sat beside her. See here, you need to turn it just slightly. The corner clicked. She looked at it, then at Trevor, and nodded once. Raymond grinned. You're doing it, Violet. And Violet smiled. Not the almost smile, but a full, genuine smile. The boxes took 3 afternoons. On the final afternoon, Raymond asked, What are you going to use yours for? Violet looked at her box, then at Raymond, and she opened her mouth. No sound came out, but the intention was clear. For the first time in 7 years, Violet had attempted to form words. Raymond simply nodded. That's cool. That evening, Carolyn approached Trevor. Tomorrow is Saturday. Would you and Raymond consider coming, just to spend time building something together? The 4 of us. No pay, Trevor said. If we come as friends. Saturday morning, the East Wing was transformed into a proper workspace. I thought we could build something together, Carolyn said. A bookshelf for Violet's room. They spent the day working on the bookshelf. By late afternoon, it was assembled. Not perfect, but real. And Violet reached for her mother's hand. Carolyn froze. Violet's fingers curled around her mother's, tentative but deliberate. Carolyn held her daughter's hand and let the connection exist. As they prepared to leave, Carolyn appeared beside Trevor's truck. Miranda gave her notice. She said she can't be part of the systematic silencing of that child's needs in favor of her mother's anxiety. She was right. You're not broken. You got terrible advice. What if Violet never speaks? Then you love her anyway. You show up, you build things together, and maybe that's when she'll finally feel safe enough to try. Would you consider staying on? Not as a contractor, but spending time with Violet regularly, teaching her woodworking? Not for pay. Raymond and I will come on Saturdays, as friends. The following Saturday, they started a new project, a workshop table at Violet's height, based on her detailed drawings. They worked on it for 3 Saturdays. Violet added details. Drawers, a pencil holder, each addition showing more confidence. The clubhouse project stretched through the summer. Violet was deeply involved in every decision, her sketches becoming more detailed, and slowly she began making small sounds. Not words, humming while she worked, sharp breaths when something fit perfectly. One hot Saturday in July, Raymond asked, "Why don't you talk? You make sounds now, but how come no words?" Carolyn caught Trevor's eye. "Let her answer if she wants to." Violet reached for her sketchpad and drew quickly. 2 figures in a car, jagged lines surrounding them like a cage. The small figure had no mouth. Raymond studied it. "You got scared. So scared that words felt dangerous." Violet nodded, tears falling. Raymond moved closer. "My mom died in a car, too. I saw it happen. And after, I couldn't talk either." Violet was crying. Raymond continued. "You don't have to use words if you're not ready. But I think maybe you got scared a long time ago, and you've just been quiet for so long that you forgot you could be loud if you wanted to." Violet looked at Raymond, then at her mother, then at Trevor, and opened her mouth. The sound was small, barely a whisper. But it was a word. "Scared," Violet said. "I was so scared." Carolyn pulled Violet closer, both crying. "I know, baby. I'm so sorry I didn't understand." Violet's voice came again, stronger. "Not broken," Raymond said. "Just scared. But not now. Not anymore." Raymond threw his arms around Violet, and she laughed, an actual audible laugh. The clubhouse was finished by mid-August. On completion day, Violet stood on the porch and spoke. "Thank you. For building with me. For not making me be different. For just being here." She continued. "Raymond, you're my best friend. Trevor, you taught me it's okay to be quiet when I need to be. Mom, I love you, even when I couldn't say it." Carolyn pulled Violet into an embrace. "I love you too. So much. Always." As they drove away, Raymond asked, "Dad, when I stopped talking, did you think I wouldn't talk again?" "Sometimes, but mostly I just tried to love you anyway." "That's what you taught Violet's mom." The Saturday gatherings continued through fall. Violet talked more each week, her voice growing stronger. She still had days where words felt too hard, but those were choices now. One Saturday in October, Violet asked, "Trevor, how did you know I wasn't broken?" "Because Raymond taught me. He taught me that silence isn't the same as absence." Violet turned to Carolyn. "Mom, are you glad I talk now?" "I'm glad you have the choice. But what I'm most glad about is that I finally learned to listen, whether you're using words or not." On a cold Saturday in December, Violet made an announcement. "I want to go back to school, regular school, with Raymond." "Are you sure?" Carolyn asked. I'm sure. And I want to go where Raymond goes, so I have someone who understands if I have quiet days. Raymond nodded. I'd help you. And if you need to be quiet sometimes, I'll tell people that's just how you are. January came, and Violet started school. The first weeks were challenging, but Violet had tools now. She had Raymond, teachers who understood, and her Saturday projects. By spring, she'd found her place. One Saturday in late spring, as they worked on a birdhouse, Violet spoke up. Trevor, do you think my dad would be proud of me? I think he'd be proud of everything you've become. Not just the talking, but the building, the creating, the way you learned to protect yourself and then learned to let people in. I don't remember his voice anymore. I feel bad about that. Carolyn moved closer. You're not forgetting him. You're just growing beyond the moment you lost him. Raymond, Trevor said, tell Violet about the sweater. After my mum died, I used to sleep with her sweater. I thought if I stopped smelling it, I'd forget her. Trevor continued. I told him that love doesn't live in sweaters or voices. It lives in how we carry people with us. You remember your dad every time you build something? Violet absorbed this. So I can talk and still love him? Yes, baby. Being happy doesn't mean you've forgotten. As the afternoon faded, Violet pulled a wooden box from her backpack. She handed Trevor a folded paper. I wrote something. To say thank you. Trevor read the letter. It talked about silence as protection, about watching them work together, about fear and courage and learning to trust. It ended. You didn't make me talk. You made it safe to want to talk. That's the greatest gift anyone ever gave me. Then Violet spoke. I want to write a book about being quiet, about how silence isn't always sad or broken. And I want to give it to other kids who are quiet, so they know they're not alone. That's beautiful, Carolyn said, tears streaming. Can I help? Raymond asked. I could draw pictures. That's exactly what the world needs, Trevor said. Over the summer, the book took shape. Violet's words were raw and honest. Raymond contributed illustrations. By late August, it was finished, a handmade volume bound by Trevor. I want to give it to kids who need it, Violet said. Trevor knew people. They started small, sharing copies with struggling families. Over the following months, Violet's book found its way to families who needed it. Letters arrived thanking her. Violet responded to each one thoughtfully. 1 year after Trevor first arrived, Carolyn hosted a gathering. Families Violet had connected with came together. Children who signed or wrote or drew or spoke as they felt comfortable. The estate filled with connection. As it wound down, Violet found Trevor. I did something unthinkable, using my silence to help other people understand theirs. You did something necessary. You took your pain and turned it into connection. Do you think it's okay to still have quiet days? Quiet days aren't failure. They're rest. You're not going backward when you're quiet. You're just honoring what you need. That evening in the clubhouse, Violet spoke. I've been thinking about what comes next. I want to keep building things. I want to keep making books. I want to create spaces where different kinds of people can exist together without anyone having to change. It's exactly right, Carolyn said. You've found your purpose. We could expand what we're doing, Trevor said to Carolyn. Using your resources, my skills, creating a program for kids who need alternative ways to process trauma. Yes, absolutely yes. And so the estate's East Wing transformed into a workshop designed for children. Carolyn established a non-profit. Trevor trained others. Families began arriving on Saturdays, finding a workspace where children could be quiet or loud, and all of it was acceptable. Violet moved through these gatherings with grace, connecting with quiet children. She just sat beside them, showed them how to work with wood. Raymond became her partner, his experience making him uniquely qualified to understand. 2 years after Trevor first arrived, the program had grown. Dozens of families participated. Violet, now 10, had become a quiet leader. She was invited to conferences to share her perspective. At one conference, Violet spoke. "When I was silent, everyone wanted me to talk. They thought my silence was the problem, but my silence was the solution. It was how I survived. Every time someone tried to force me to speak before I was ready, they were telling me I was broken." She paused. "What finally helped me wasn't intervention. It was people who sat with me in my silence and showed me it was okay. If you want to help kids like I was, stop trying to make them talk. Start learning to listen to their silence." Her message resonated. Her book was published. Letters poured in from around the world. One Saturday afternoon, 3 years after Trevor first arrived, Violet surprised everyone. "I want to build something big, a permanent structure." She pulled out detailed drawings. The silent voice garden, half completely quiet, half open for conversation. And in the center, a gazebo where both are welcome. "It's possible," Trevor said, studying the drawings. "We can build this." The silent voice garden took 2 years to complete, built by families who'd been part of the program. The dedication ceremony happened on a perfect spring morning, exactly 5 years after Trevor had first arrived. Hundreds gathered. Violet stood before the crowd, now 12. This garden exists because people believed in something unthinkable. They believed that silence didn't need fixing, that healing could happen through building things together. She paused. "This garden is for every person who's ever felt too different, too quiet, too wrong. It's a reminder that you don't have to change to be valuable. You don't have to speak to be heard. Here, you can be exactly who you are, and that will always be enough." The crowd erupted in various forms of celebration: applause, quiet clapping, nodding. As the ceremony wound down, Trevor stood beside Carolyn by the gazebo. They watched Violet and Raymond lead children through the space. "Did you ever imagine this?" Carolyn asked. "No. I thought I was just here to sand some wood." "I thought my daughter was broken. I never imagined that what she needed was a carpenter who understood silence." They watched Violet move through the garden, this child who'd found her voice not because anyone forced her, but because people made it safe enough that she wanted to. That evening, Violet found Trevor sitting on a bench. She sat beside him without speaking. Finally, she spoke softly. "Thank you. For everything. You did all the hard work. You found your way back. You created all of this. I still have quiet days. Is that okay? It's perfect. The goal was never to make you stop being quiet. It was to make sure your silence was choice instead of cage." They sat together as the last light faded. Around them, the silent voice garden stood as testament to everything they'd learned. That silence and sound could coexist. That healing happened on its own timeline. That the most profound gift was acceptance without condition. Trevor thought about the journey. From a broken family seeking purpose to a community learning acceptance. From a silent child terrified to speak to a young advocate, changing how the world understood communication. From a desperate mother trying to fix her daughter to a woman who'd learned that love meant accepting, not changing. It had all started with a simple repair job, but it had become something far more significant. A reminder that healing didn't always look like cure. That wholeness came in many forms. That the unthinkable act of acceptance could change everything. And as Violet leaned against him in the darkness, comfortable in silence, confident in choice, fully present in the life she'd built. Trevor understood that this was the real story. Not about speaking or silence, but about connection, about showing up, about building something beautiful together, one piece of wood, one quiet moment, one patient afternoon at a time. The story of how acceptance could transform lives, how presence could heal wounds, and how sometimes doing the unthinkable simply meant believing that people were already enough, exactly as they were.